All right, you guys, I am here with Fahamu Pecou. This man here, you are a scholar, you are an artist in general. I'll just say an artist. It's really a pleasure to speak with you today. I wanted to sit down and have a conversation. So I know, first of all, you were just at my school, Kennesaw State University.
Yes.
That was my school. I graduated in 2012,
okay.
and I had no idea you were coming, so I'm really upset. But how did that go for you?
It was great. It was an awesome event. I did an event called Intersessions, which is a conversation series that brings together people from the world of hip-hop and in the art world to have a conversation about the intersections between those two spaces. Right. And it was a really great conversation, very moving, a conversation on black manhood and black masculinity, and it featured Stickman from the group Dead Prez and Okori Johnson, who's a cellist here in Atlanta.
And I was going to say, most of your art, you infuse hip-hop and pop culture, and that's kind of what you use as your base. Now, you really focus on black masculinity, correct?
Yes.
So with that, I know the term masculine and feminine in itself is it's one of those things that creates a lot of tension because we have these definitions that I feel like we try to live up to, and then we kind of create ourselves off of those definitions. So just talk about that in itself, black masculinity. Like, what does that mean to you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that the concepts, the conceptions that we have of masculinity and femininity are very rigid. They're locked into a very specific Eurocentric idea of what those things mean. And a part of what I do through my work is I challenge those ideas, specifically around masculinity and specifically around black masculinity, because I think, you know, adding that article, adding black to that, you know, changes the narrative, right? And so, you know, what I am attempting to do is both expose as well as explode the kind of stereotypes and misconceptions around black masculinity that have prevailed over the way black men both see themselves and the way society sees black men, by taking on those stereotypes and performing them in a way that causes people to have to like question, and it challenges their ideas and their expectations. And I think it's, you know, a necessary conversation. One of the reasons that I'm really interested in the conversation and in that dialogue is because a lot of times the information that we're getting, the narratives that we're hearing, they come from the perspective of people who are not themselves black men. And so I think it's important as black men that we speak up, essentially, you know, that we talk about what our experiences are, that we talk about the things that are overlooked in society, the things that most people would never consider, you know, when it comes to the experience of being black and male, you know, in this country and in the world, really.
Right. And I'm glad you started talking about that, because I noticed in your artwork, one of the ones that really stood out to me, Hard to Death. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know even with your Niggas in Paris, things like that, like you really transform the idea of that negative stereotype and bring it to light, like you said, the Ethiopian royalty, that word Negus, N-E-G-U-S. And so can you talk about your idea behind the concept of Hard to Death?
Sure. Hard to Death was a series that I began to play around with, thinking about the ways in which a lot of black men, particularly young black men, began to define and shape their manhood, and it's often couched in this language and in this kind of terminology and experience and performance that's so rigid that it becomes self-destructive. And so the ultimate question that I was asking is, when does self-preservation become self-destruction? And so I understand that some of the like machismo and the positioning and, you know, the bravado like comes from a place of resistance and refusal against the way society kind of imposes, you know, negativity upon black men's bodies. And so, you know, you kind of have to, you know, get hard and tough to face the world. But at a certain point, it becomes, like I said, it becomes prohibitive, it becomes restrictive, it becomes destructive. And so the Hard to Death series really took a look at the performance of black masculinity from various perspectives. You know, from, you know, one of the suites within that body of work is called Second Childhood, where I talk about the ways in which you know, a lot of older men, or older black men, are often looking at the boys to get their cues on how to move in the world. So they're taking their fashion style and their sensibilities and their lingo from boys. You know, like one of the things that's always been absurd to me is the ways in which we condemn like hip hop artists for, you know, talking about the things that they talk about. But I'm like, you know, this is an 18-year-old kid. If I had the kind of access and privilege and, you know, exposure that some of these young men have at 18, I would have been saying some of the same things, right? And so, you know, our challenge as men should not be to necessarily condemn, but to coach, right? So how do we take a young boy who is wilding out doing what boys do and, you know, prepare them to move in the world in a way that's productive, but also a way that is that preserves them in their identity?